Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Robert Barr, and I am pleased that you are joining me and one another for this streaming Shabbat service. We are living at challenging, difficult times, and this moment is an opportunity for us to pause, to catch our breath, to think about where we've been, and to think about where we are going. So put away the pencil and the paper. Put away the notebook and the keys. Set aside the shovel and hammer. Rest. For this interval, no buying, no selling, no working, no laboring, no straining, not living in the past, not planning for the future. This is a time for celebration, for joy, for mirth. We are here alive to rejoice in another Sabbath, another opportunity to be together, grateful for our family and our friends. With no distraction, we touch and are touched, the great gift of the Sabbath. Again, I am Rabbi Robert Barr of Congregation Beth Adam. That's our bricks and mortar congregation here in Loveland, Ohio, and our Jewish community. That's our online initiative that we began about 15 years ago. We began it because we recognized that there was an opportunity to reach people around the world, literally. Students who grew up here, moved to different cities, members who may have moved but wanted to stay connected, people who learned about our congregation and wanted to participate more fully. During the pandemic, obviously, it became even more important during social distancing. And we continue to utilize technology to create moments in time like this when we can be together. But it's not just the technology that is so essential. What is essential is the voice of Judaism that we have been giving expression to here at Congregation Beth Adam for over 40 years. We give voice to a bold, dynamic Judaism, a Judaism that recognizes we are not our ancestors. We are different than they are. We have new insights, new ideas than they had, and we need to create a Judaism that is reflective of that in all aspects, whether it's the liturgy that we're reading, the service, whether it's the educational programs that we offer our children or our adults, whether the way we wrestle with ideas. These things reflect who we are and what we're about. We don't need to continue to mimic and parrot our ancestors. We need to create anew. And you're a part of that this evening by joining us for this Shabbat service. So I'm really glad you're here. Now, being online and using technology affords us several opportunities. You could be chatting right now with friends. I know people on bethadam.org like to do that. If you're on one of our Facebook pages, let us know where you are participating from. Being online also means you don't have to watch our service when it streams at 7 o'clock. You can watch it anytime it is convenient. And we know that people in different time zones are probably watching it at different times because that's more convenient. That's part of technology. We want to be available when it is convenient for you. And it also means I can record a conversation with somebody and then bring it into our service, which I'm going to do a little bit later. But before I do that, let's continue with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. On this Shabbat, we create our moment in time. We pause, reflect upon our yesterdays and tomorrows, to renew our ties with family and friends, to restore our energies, to refresh our spirits. As the sun descends and shadows lengthen, the distraction of the day gives way to the stillness of night. It is time now for us to see, not with our eyes, but with our hearts and minds. As the day gives way to evening, it's time for us to welcome the Shabbat. The candles stand before us, waiting to be lit. We recall our ancestors as we too seek to dispel the darkness and banish the cold, to bring glowing softness, warmth, and safety into our homes. May the dancing flames of these candles kindle warmth within our hearts, wisdom in our minds, passion in our souls. Baruch ha'or ba'olam. Blessed is the life within the world. Baruch ha'or ba'adam. Blessed is the light within each person. Baruch ha'or ba'shabbat. Blessed is the light of the Sabbath. In time, disturbances will pass The difficulties will dissolve. In time, aggravations will be forgotten, obstacles overcome. In time, we will find solutions even to our most pressing concerns. Mountains move and even disappear, clouds part, revealing an ever-present sun. In time, moments of desperation will give way to an inner calm, and through others, we will find comfort for our fears. In time, may we find ways to accept life's unending turbulence completely and move gently forward in time. As I said, I recorded a conversation earlier with my friend and colleague, Reverend Sharon Dittmar. Those of you who have joined us in the past know that Reverend Dittmar and I are good friends. We've had several conversations, and I wanted to talk to her about interfaith conversations that she has had and that we both have had over the years. So sitting to my right is Reverend Sharon Dittmar, who those of you who've joined us before know that she and I have had many conversations. In fact, we recently had a conversation about having conversations. So I'm glad you're here. And you and I had led a trip to Israel together, an interfaith trip to Israel.
Mhm.
And in part of that trip, we talked about interfaith, seeing literally the land from different perspectives, both the Holy Land, the land of Jesus, and Israel, and the Jewish people, and Jewish history. And we were going to lead a trip, and unfortunately, the events in Israel have made it impossible. We won't be leading that trip this summer. And as a part of what's happened because of the events in Israel, there have been fractures oftentimes between religious groups right now. And a lot of us, yourself, myself included, have done a lot of what we would call interfaith work, working across our religious differences or trying to work together. And I'm just wondering, one, can you talk about your interfaith work over the course of your career, and then we want to talk about some of the problems that we see right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the good stuff before we talk about the bad stuff.
So for 19 years, I was a parish minister. And during that time, I worked a lot on interfaith relationships. So relationships with people who came from faiths and denominations that were other than my own. And they're all different, right? And they also change over time because denominations and people change over time, right? And I was always curious about what other people thought. And I was always curious about other religions. And some Unitarian Universalists can be negative about Christianity. I never was. I grew up Christian as a Presbyterian, and I never went through a period of being angry at it. So I am aware there have been excesses in Christianity, and harms, real harms, whether it's sex abuse or there's just been so much. There's just been so much harm. Religion can be used as such a weapon, horrible weapon. But I was always interested in different people who were Christian and what their faith was and how they interpreted we would call it Christianity, the New and Old Testament, Hebrew scriptures, right? So I was curious and listening, right? So I like to listen. I was always someone also who was willing to go out on a limb and be very uncomfortable in a room in order to meet other people. So when I was the minister in Avondale, I routinely went into spaces where I was the only white woman. I was the only woman, I was the only white person, and I was the only person who was like 35 and looking more like 30. And I just felt like it was my job to figure out what to do in these spaces. And I would not say it came easily or naturally because I had to learn different cultures that were not my own. And to this day, a culture I can spend time in, I might not really be comfortable in or feel awkward because it's not like me, right? And to be aware of that. I've also been in spaces where I didn't speak the language, so I was the only person in the room who didn't speak the language, and that's an interesting experience too, and that's been part of my interfaith work.
Overseas? Is that what you...
No, here in the United States. Work it involved immigration, but a lot of the other people at the table were Spanish speakers, and I was the only person who wasn't. And we were talking with people, for example, who were working on immigration and they were speaking Spanish. Someone had to translate and I had to wait.
Right.
So I guess getting used to like being uncomfortable and being curious about the differences, because just because I have one way of doing things doesn't mean it's the only way or the right way.
But and in the interfaith, did you find that theology or belief could be a problem? Because there's, I mean, one of the challenges I think with interfaith work is we need to respect the other, even if we don't. Obviously, I don't agree, because if I'm doing interfaith work and I'm doing it as a rabbi and I'm Jewish, I'm not a priest. I don't agree. I mean, I literally don't agree, right? It's by definition. And so all of a sudden you're in a conversation with somebody who you may like, but you have core disagreements with, fundamental disagreements.
Yeah. So not everyone would agree with me here. This is just how Sharon Dittmar dealt with this. When I entered parish ministry and it was in an urban setting, I found my theology was a lot more progressive than my neighbors. And I remember speaking with a female rector at an Episcopalian church in the city. And she said to me, "Well, Sharon, I just learned you got to be with people when you can." And that was her way of saying sometimes you can't be with them.
Mm-hmm.
I did have an experience one time, for example, this is a good 25 years now, where I went to an AIDS healing service and it became an altar call to heal people of their sins. And I did not go up because it was assuming homosexuality was a sin. And I suddenly had been attending one event and found it was another. So frankly, I also had to live with periodically not knowing what to do and trying to figure out how I wanted to have difficult conversations afterwards and where was my moment to have a productive conversation about that, right? So I don't want to create some story that this was all full of wonderful moments. But I also then had an experience of being able to go into communities, and if they would say to me like, "Well, I don't think women can preach," I didn't get fantastically upset by that. I'd just be like, "Oh," like I had the capacity to not take it personally. Which for some people, the personal is political and do something. That wasn't my way. I'm not saying it's the only or the best way, but it did at times like enable me to go longer with people so that I could get to do other work with them. And I think different people do this work differently. This was just my way. But it also meant, when I was working with, for example, the Muslim community and women wanted to wear head cover, I never had an issue. I wasn't like, "You're not being feminist." I was like, "That's my word, my definition, my story. They have a different world and story, and I want to hear their worlds and stories. And they can wear whatever cover they want. And I am grateful to be in relationship with them." And then I was able to do more work further with that, right? Those were how I succeeded in interfaith work. And it was about building relationships over time, showing up in spaces where I could, not going to the spaces where we did not agree.
Well, I guess that's the question. So what about those spaces we don't agree? Because right now, I mean, this is really an issue. I mean, that where the Jewish community is sick is, we talk about allies, people we have a relationship with, and often right now, because of the events in Israel, and everything, all the reverberations, is conversations that used to exist. People don't know how to talk to each other anymore, or people are angry with each other. I mean, to be frank, the Jewish and the Muslim community is really, oftentimes amongst many, are having some real challenges. People don't know how to bridge that divide, even though there was once a relationship. And again, with the Jewish community right now, lots of folks are upset with Israel, and there's lots of statements being written about Israel. And I don't want to get into right or wrong for the moment, but the Jewish, depending on where you are on that continuum, and I for lots of folks, it's more of a continuum. And people within the Jewish community, it's like, how do we what happened? Where was that relationship? Was it a real relationship? This with the rise of anti-Semitism, and where are people at? I think that's the challenge right now. I think in interfaith work, because I think people are there's a sense of it's almost stalled right now, at least around the folks that I'm hearing.
And maybe it is for a time, right? Maybe people are at such odds in one area that they're not going to be able to do shared work on anything for a time. If I were still a parish minister, I would be considering what are my relationships now and how can I be supportive of people. But the world wants you to choose. The world doesn't want you to be understanding of a lot of different positions, right? Either you're with us or you're against us. And people at times have gotten disappointed with me because I haven't wanted to sever relationships quickly. There are a lot of people who unfriended people after the 2016 election. I didn't unfriend anyone. So I'll often remain longer. And again, maybe my identities enable me to do that. And I need to understand that as a privilege and not expect other people to be doing that as well. So I also don't judge people who need to tap out or take a break. But we're only going to get as far, we're going to move at the speed of trust. And if we don't trust, we're not going to move. And if we didn't have really deep relationships, we're not going to discuss the hardest things. And because we're not going to be able to listen to one another. We're going to feel like our heads are on fire.
And what happens when we really are fundamentally different? And pick an issue, a religion. You pick a religious. You mentioned the service you went to, where the church where they saw homosexuality as a sin. So it's a conversation. We've had in Cincinnati with different clergy, where they're absolutely opposed to same-sex marriage. And I remember sitting in a room with you. I don't know if we were sitting in a room together. That conversation came up with some clergy, and it's like, and I found what they were saying homophobic to a degree, but their excuse or their reasoning was, but this is what my religion says. And so do you say, well, if your religion says this, it's okay because religion say it? Or do they get a pass? Or do you say, you know what, there's a problem with, we got to deal with the religious text that we're dealing with? I mean, to me, this is where you and I are different, I guess, as clergy. You're much more, you're nicer than I mean, you've always been, in the sense of when we work, your issue is the person. I like people, but I struggle with ideas, and I want to hold people accountable to the ideas that they.
And that's good. And again, everyone does this differently. So I guess I want to be really careful because some people feel like they must protest because their lives depend on it. When I think of like a Black queer activist, they're like, my life is challenged daily and I don't have the time to be patient or say, I don't agree with that and stop. And so I really want to honor that. For me, my way has been more, I want to talk to you later. So the event I went to that ended up being a homophobic altar call, I want to go later to the organizers and say, I won't participate in again if you do that, because that's not what my theology is, and I can't be in a room like that. There are other things, however, we agree on, such as A, B, C, D. I'd like to be in rooms like that with you. So I would tell them, I'd clarify my values. I wouldn't tell them their values were nutty and horrible, but I'd just make it really clear, I'm not that person. That's not satisfying for some people. They would prefer me to be more like, and here's why you're wrong. But I was okay just being like, I don't agree. That's not me. My theology and values don't back that up. But I don't feel like I need to teach you to be different.
Do you think,
or try to teach you? I don't think people want to be taught when there's big
right.
Disagreements that they're like, we just don't agree.
But do you think interfaith is getting more difficult? over your career, as people are becoming more balkanized, as people are becoming more polarized, as religion, we're both liberal clergy,
Yeah.
right? And as certain clergy are becoming more radicalized and politicized, is it gotten harder to have? Because I mean, we were in an interfaith group together. That's how we spent a lot of time with multiple. There were several of us. We used to have interfaith groups out here in Loveland, Ohio, where I am. I don't see many interfaith clergy groups. Maybe they're not inviting me. Maybe I'm not the nicest guy. Is there a group that no one invited me to that no one's telling me?
I don't know about it. So I haven't been a parish minister for almost 8 years now. So I don't know what it's like at the community level. It probably varies community. My answer is yes and no. I want to take an even longer look. So 100 years ago, women wouldn't have been in the clergy rooms, right? So when you think about it, you're like, we're in the rooms now. 100 years ago, we weren't there. Is that a huge change? Yeah. Are there new conversations because of it? Yeah. I think we're in a time of heightened tension and distrust. And is it harder to meet in the spaces where you do agree? Yes, I do think there is. It is. But I always was willing to go the long distance. So there was a colleague of mine in the city, a Black male minister, who, when he started ministry, didn't think women could preach.
Mhm.
And a different colleague convinced him otherwise. And then I met him decades later after he initially thought that. And one of my joys was forming a relationship with him when people were like, oh no, he doesn't agree enough with our UU values. And I'm like, well, I'm going to see where we do agree. And I ended up finding a lot of shared ground with this clergy person with many different identities from me and a different religious tradition. And it ended up being a joy. And if I'd written him off because of what I'd been told or what we looked like on paper or in picture, I would have missed something. Not everyone does that work, but that was a real source of joy for me. I have found myself surprised where I could quote cross the aisle and where someone else was willing to. And it often wasn't the people I would have guessed when or why. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be open for those moments.
No, that's something that clearly, I know I was joking about it, but you're very good at it. I mean, you really invest the energy and time in trying to stick it out.
Yes.
I mean, that which is difficult. Right now occasionally I'll be invited to do interfaith dialogues, and I keep on saying, I don't want to just do sort of the simplistic dialogue, that we'll all agree on, what people like to do is we're going to talk about the Abrahamic religions.
Well, we're the people of the book, right? You don't want that conversation.
I want to talk about where we disagree and why. Not that we have to be angry with each other, but our disagreements are fundamental, and we need to talk about some of our people who are the people we're embarrassed by. I mean, the other, because some Jewish folks, some Christian folks, some Muslim folks, they take that text and they turn it into something that I don't see it.
Like weaponize it.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do we got to talk about some of that stuff, because if we only talk about, oh, it's so nice, we're all,
yep.
Right. I mean, and right now that seems even more, there's more tension around that. I mean, there seems to be more complications, because the other thing about being clergy is we're often called to give the seal of approval, right? Whether it's a liberal politician or a conservative politician, having clergy stand there says this person's okay.
God's on our side.
God's on our side. They open the House of Representatives with a prayer. I mean, so, we play this interesting role because we symbolize something greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that value set and trying to talk about that seems really, pretty tough.
Okay, so Unitarian Universalists are like the far progressive. We come out of the far progressive wing of Unitarians were Christian, as were Universalists. So now that has not stopped many Christians from telling me I'm going to hell, the fundamentalist kind.
You can join me.
But good. But we do, like in our services, have a flavor of white Protestant culture in our worship services at UU congregation. We usually do. And so has that given me a sense that I'm in a mainstream and I'm safer and cocooned? Maybe at times. I don't want to lie about that. So then am I operating from a place of privilege instead of like, I don't walk out in the world and wear hair cover and people are like, oh, she's a Muslim. I don't walk around, with a Star of David necklace and people are like, oh, she's Jewish, right? This doesn't happen to me. I pass as a white Protestant American, and I'm very aware of that. The only person I knew how to be, though, was a person who would say, this is what my value is, and it's not that. And I didn't feel like I needed to chase down people to their face to say why I'm not that. I would publish a letter, an op-ed piece, which I've done. I preached sermons about what I thought. I explained why I didn't agree with what other people were saying. And to this day, I wonder, does that come from a place of privilege that I felt I didn't need to go farther? But I kind of felt like I can't explain why some people are fundamentalist. And if I go at them and say, you're fundamentalist, they're going to be like, you're a gnat, go away. Like, why do they care what I think? But I could clarify who I am and what I think and what matters. Like that, I felt like I could do, and I could lead on, and I could write an editorial on that or preach a sermon. Or give no one ever asked to give me testimony, but I would have given testimony at a hearing, and I would have done that gladly. But I always understood it was from my lens, and any other person might be like, do not agree with that person.
Interesting. Well, thanks. We need to pull it together. We can keep on going for a long time.
Do you think it's a privileged position though? Because we get masked. I'm serious, as like a white Protestant. We're not.
Right.
We are, but we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm struggling with, I'm struggling with where the dialogue takes place and which rooms it takes place.
Yeah.
And how do we do that interreligiously when there are disagreements? Because and again, you go to the sort of the personal relationship more,
yes,
and I keep on going more to the faith relationships and how to faith
like at the denominational level.
And so that's a little bit different. So that's where I'm struggling with. So I think the issue of privilege and being an individual, but I'm looking at what the faith says and what the clergy how the clergy defends their faith, and what happens when clergy come together and they have different faith traditions and they're trying to work together. I mean, I'm in a room and it's not uncommon where I'm in what's an interfaith service and they're praying in the name of Jesus, and I'm like looking around going,
I'm not praying in the name of Jesus.
And does anyone notice me? And does anyone realize that could be understood as offensive? I try to take people, I go, okay, this is their faith tradition, that's cool. But if they're trying to create something interfaith, then there's work to be done.
Yes.
Right? There's they dismissed it. And if they really want different people to come together, they're going to have to push their boundaries a little bit.
Do you know what also, just for clarity, in a UU congregation, you will find people of a variety of ethnicities with a variety of religious background, including Jewish,
right,
Muslim, Buddhist, anything. I have apologized to people when I felt like I owed them an apology. So speaking of personal, like interfaith leaders, or if I felt like I said something later that was offensive, and I think that's one thing that's important. But your point is really well taken about how to do that work. I was willing to work with people over time, but I got myself out of the rooms where I was like, they're never going to change.
So we're going to have to get out of the room right now because we're done. So fascinating conversation. Thanks for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time to share this conversation with us as well. I always enjoy my conversations with Reverend Sharon Dittmar. She's a good friend, and I find her thoughtful, insightful. She challenges me to think in new ways. She opens up ideas that I may not have considered before. She is a great teacher, and I'm so pleased that she is both a personal friend and a friend of our community, and that she's willing to share her time and expertise with us. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and drew ideas from it as well. Now, we continue our service with a little wine. We celebrate the fruit of the vine and the bounty of nature as we lift the cup. For we are part of nature, which gave us birth and continues to sustain us. Even as we depend upon nature, so do we influence its course. Through the search for understanding, we've gained the knowledge to shape our world. Guided by the best of human wisdom and the compassion of our spirit, we accept the responsibility which rests upon us. May the taste of the wine or the juice stir within us a reverence for nature and a respect for human endeavor. Ruchim chachayim ba'olam, blessed is the life within the world. Ruchim chachayim ba'adam, blessed is the life within us. And we say, l'chaim, to life. Our service is drawing to a close, and I'm delighted that we were able to share this time together. If you want to learn more about upcoming events at Beth Adam, go to bethadam.org. Bethadam.org, that's our website. And there you're going to find upcoming events, adult education on Sunday morning, hybrid Shabbat services. We do those sometimes as well. We do streaming like we did tonight. Hybrid are interactive. You can join us for that as well. Our upcoming Passover Seder. So go to bethadam.org and learn more about upcoming activities and about our congregation. And we conclude with the words we end with each week. May we know blessings those who are near. May we know blessings those who are far. May the Sabbath bring its goodness to everyone soon, wherever they are. May we know blessings through the day, and may we know blessings through the night. May health be for our children and for all people, and all things soon be right. May we know blessings in our comings, and may we know blessings when we depart. May we live each day with peace and wisdom in each heart. Ken Yehi, let it be. Shabbat Shalom.